Thank you everyone, and thank you the 4 panelists. As you know, the panel is about building a net zero economy, and we have 4 panelists that are helping us to get there, either as investors or builders of companies. So what I'm going to ask is, for each of you, if you can talk a little bit about who you are, your role in your organization, and what your organization is doing. And we're going to start with María Sansigre, who is representing Klima, that is a clean tech and climate investor.
Hello everyone. So I'm María, I'm investment director in Klima. Klima is a partnership between Fund-Alantra and Enagas, which is a Spanish gas TSO, and we are supporting scale-ups within the energy transition across Europe and North America. So we are supporting companies that are already in the growth stage, and that's all.
Thank you, María. Then we also have María Eugenia Girón, who is an experienced entrepreneur and executive, and also an investor. And today she is representing Oceana, that is the largest or leading ocean conservation organization, which is very relevant today as well, because today is Ocean Day globally. So if you can talk a little bit more about what you are doing.
Thank you, Iñaki. Good afternoon, everyone. It's so great to be here and celebrating the 10th anniversary of the South Summit too. And yes, I serve at the board of Oceana, where I am vice chair. But not only that, I serve at 3 listed companies as an independent board member, and I combine that with being jury member with the European Innovation Council, which is quite relevant for the summit on innovation that we are doing today. And I'm really happy to be talking about net zero today at Oceans Day and having the opportunity to explain how oceans contribute too much to this goal that we have set for ourselves.
Thank you, María Eugenia. Then the 3rd panelist is Gonzalo Muñoz, who is the founder of Manuia, who is helping other companies to implement ESG strategies. But he's also very involved with the UN Climate Action Group, and he was very involved with the COP 25 and 26.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks so much, Iñaki. Congrats to the South Summit for the 10th anniversary, and great to be here with this esteemed panelists. I am here with those 2 hats. On one side, I had the privilege of leading the Global Climate Action Agenda, the United Nations, meaning COP 25 and COP 26, and now I'm the chair of the advisory board for the Climate Champions team for the next 2 years, so representing mostly the Race to Zero as the global campaign that is aligning all non-state actors, all businesses from all around the world to align with science and to commit to the 1.5-degree target, but also with my entrepreneurship hat with Manuia as the consultancy initiative from Triciclos. I'm also a co-founder of the B Corp movement in Latin America. So great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And then finally, we have Eduard Castañeda, who is the co-founder and chief product officer of Wallbox. As you know, Wallbox is one of the successful startups coming out from Spain. They went public last year, and they are the world-leading electric car charging solutions.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Iñaki. Eventually, we are really proud to be here. I think without South Summit, we would not be in the situation we are today. As you said, we are a global leading charging solutions provider, and eventually we are also integrating the energy solutions in our portfolio. We announced Sirius, which is a way to eventually make it possible, the net zero, even for big corporates. And I hope we can speak about really interesting topics today.
Thank you, the four of you. So the first question for the panel, when people talk about how to become net zero, there are multiple initiatives that you can take. One could be changing human habits. The other one is implementing public policies, and you can penalize some individuals or some corporations. Or the third option is to bring innovation or technology to become net zero. So in your opinion, what of the 3 is going to be more relevant in the next 10 years? So we can start with Eduard, the last one.
Thank you. So taking care of the product side, for me, it's easy to answer. I would say that the first and the third are the ones that we can cover and we can have influence. Eventually, with innovation, we can make the transition smoother and faster. We know, for example, in a charging environment, we have still a lot of blockers. Range anxiety is one of them. That's why we are also providing high power charging. But eventually also self-consumption is something interesting. We are seeing more and more nowadays the topic of energy independence that is becoming less fossil fuel dependent. And I think nowadays happens a really interesting thing, that at your home you can have enough energy to provide your daily commute. So eventually, if you have solar panels and you can distribute energy smartly, you can charge that energy in your car. So I think this did not happen for the last 100 years, when you can think about having a horse in the backyard and you were able to even take a trip with that. And I think empowering this, making this solution available and making the UX, which is the final thing, when you refer that the first, what we can do to the customers is providing a nice user experience. I think we converge to provide this seamless solution.
So definitely, you are building an innovative company, and your take is that technology is going to help us get there. So Gonzalo, what is your take? Because you have been involved in multiple groups helping governments influence that net zero transition. So what do you think that is more relevant, in your opinion?
Yeah, I would like to answer taking that into consideration. I had the privilege of being not only an entrepreneur, working in big companies, national governments, multilateralism, NGOs. And I think that the question is related to the speed and scale that we require, right? I mean, all of the above, everyone needs to take their part and do the work. But then when it comes to the speed that we require to solve such a crisis that we're confronting, seems to me like definitely we should not blame the consumer. That's very risky to expect that the consumers will then somehow have all the knowledge to ask for the right type of whatever type of product or service. Seems to me like the two elements are not necessarily clear in the question are the supply sector. We need every company to understand that this is a moment of truth. This is a moment when every single company in the world must understand that it's unacceptable to live with negative externalities. It's unacceptable to be providing a product that is based on fossil fuels and environmental destruction. This is a moment when every company that knows perfectly how to improve what we are producing, and I'm speaking as a producer myself, we know how to improve that. This is a moment of truth in that sense. And then what we're seeing is the activation of what is called the ambition loop. Public policies are there. Countries and the multilateralism are also doing the work. We have the Paris Agreement, we have the rule book. We're now, in this day, today, indeed, discussing the end of the internal combustion engine in Europe. Things are happening. But then we, as private sector individuals, need to understand that this is the moment when we have to take that and do our job in order to then activate their ambition at the same time. In that sense, the ball in this moment is in the financial institutions. Is the money the one that is accelerating the change, and all of the rest should be taking that into consideration and then move ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Gonzalo. María Eugenia, in your case, you are representing Oceania today, but we all know that you sit on many boards. You are a director of many companies, and it's like people talk about all the ESG policies that are being implemented and decided at a board level. So if you can talk a little bit more about this.
Okay, yes, definitely. And I'm going to take it where you left it. Because to drive any change, whatever change, we need to have a combination of three elements. One is the science. Science is telling us what is going on, but also what are the solutions. The other one is regulation. And living in Europe, we know we are living through this tsunami of regulation that is nudging us, is pushing us to make change. And then the third element is social expectations. And all of these, when you sit at the board of a company, you can feel all of this. You can feel, regulation coming up from Europe, and this is, once you have a directive, then it's turned into a law at the different local country members, and all recommendations, and then it's the board of companies that need to integrate this into how are we going to do it? How does this fit into our strategic plan? But not only that, we also need the science, and you mentioned innovation, and I do think there's an opportunity to push innovation policies, because we still need to get a lot of answers from innovation. We need to get to be able to have capture of carbon at a lower cost. We need to solve and innovate in technologies that do not emit CO2 for some processes that we still don't know how to do. So we need to push this agenda. And regarding the social, and I agree with you that we should not blame consumers or put all of the weight of the change in consumers. But it is true that society now has different expectations from companies. And this is ESG. These are the different expectations that society has of companies, which goes beyond making a profit.
I fully agree with that. Maria?
Well, many things have been said already, so I would like to complement what was Gonzalo initiated and then followed by María Eugenia. I think the consumer is about, we have residential or in the B2C side, an individual cannot decide far away from recycle or choose one product or the other, which is already available or not in the market. But for example, what we find, for example, in Klima, we invest in B2B businesses. So we find that the consumer, when it is a utility company, for example, if they want to play a role in the energy transition, they have to pick these innovative technologies, implement them, and they are responsible for the scale-up of these technologies, because at the end are the ones requiring the push of the market that provides this company the power to scale up or to, for example, invest, or with investors invest in a manufacturing facility. So it's not only about having the money, because the money is out there, but we need the market to ask for these technologies, so therefore the money has a return, because otherwise the money won't go there, and so that's my...
Definitely as an investor, they're right.
No, but not only as an investor. So scale up is coming when the market is pulling, and that has happened with solar or wind, for example, so far.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And also there are a few studies that claim that to get to net zero by 2050, governments, companies, individuals will have to invest over $200 trillion to get there, right? And those are going to be investments in very broad categories like water, food, circular economy, construction, mobility, energy. So one thing is the macro piece, but you are all involved in very particular things, and I would like to talk about the specific examples to share with everyone. And I would like each of you to talk about some of the specific examples that you are involved to get to net zero. Like in your case, it will be like one of the investments that you have done. In your case, one of the things that you are seeing at Oceana, for example, right? So, Maria?
Okay, so for example, one of our first investments is Mainspring Energy. It's a company based in San Francisco, and they have developed a super innovative linear generator, which instead is a gas-to-power technology, so instead producing the power via combustion, it's doing it by compression. So with that, you are avoiding a large part of the CO2 emissions, and it's a technology for the energy transition because it can work on gas, then on hydrogen and biomethane. So as the new fuels are available in the market, then you can pivot and change the type of fuel that you are using to produce electricity. So that is an example.
Yeah, and Eugenia, if you can share.
Two examples of two campaigns that Oceana is doing in this fight for net zero. One campaign is called Save the Oceans, Feed the World. The ocean generates protein, an abundant ocean generates protein for 3,000 million people every single day. And this protein doesn't emit any CO2. And you have just heard Al Gore talking about how agriculture and cattle, they represent 25% of the emissions. So having the ability to have a protein that is very good for us, very healthy, that doesn't contribute to pollution or to CO2 emissions is a campaign that we have been pushing for very many years. The second one is plastics. Plastics, they come from oil, and as since we measure, it's only been going up, the production of plastic. They tell us there's recycling, but the reality is that we need to turn the faucet. We need to do that, and this is something we are working at. And having worked with different companies, there's a commitment, and I want to mention this too, commitment by Coca-Cola already to reduce 25% of their plastics so as to use refillable. And during the last shareholders meeting at Amazon last week, 46% of shareholders are asking for Amazon to provide the option of plastic-free deliveries. We are not there, but 46% of the shareholders, it's already very close. We will get there.
Thank you. Gonzalo?
Well, I would like to explain what we're seeing from the UN Climate Champions team in what we refer to the 4 main categories in which we're seeing an exponential change. That's, we say coal, car, cash, and trees. And that refers to coal, electricity, and how we're seeing an absolute change and an exponentiality on how not only solar and wind power is taking advance, even, of course, in this critical moment of the invasion of Ukraine from Russia, that is being accelerated all around the world. That's something that it's not only relevant for decarbonizing the economy, but also to give much more independence to everyone in relation to the source of energy. The second one, as I said before, not only electromobility, but also clean transport is definitely ramping up to be something that is changing our logic. Please think about where we were not only 6 years ago. 2016, the International Energy Agency said that we will be selling internal combustion engine cars even in the decade of the 70s and the 80s this century. We're now talking about the end of the internal combustion engine in the decade of the 30s, no longer the 2040s. So the world has accelerated almost 30, 40 years in less than 6 years. That's absolutely relevant to understand how much sometimes we are trapped in a linear way of thinking. The third one I will refer is trees, referring to nature. And that, for example, means to put a focus on, for example, veganism as the most accelerated change in nutrition changes of the humanity ever, and are now integrated to ocean, right? Seaweed will be a relevant element on our trajectory to understand the role of nature. But then the last one is cash, and when it comes to cash, the financial institutions around the world are now leading a cultural change, because this requires not only a commitment from the board, but then the analysts that will be putting that money and then flowing that capital and asking for that return with impact is playing a fundamental role in changing the culture of the whole value chain.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Eduard?
Well, we are seeing a massive investment on those renewables. That amount of energy is being deployed, but is uncontrollable. Eventually, by today, we cannot actively control the weather. So that's one of the examples, right? So at a scale, eventually software and hardware can help on this, and that's why I was referring at the beginning on Sirius. No? Sirius is a platform that conveys even having a bidirectional charger that is able to discharge your car and support when there is a peak tariff and the energy is more expensive, and you self-consume, and later you can you can charge later. So we want to make at the scale this, because it's happening at a local level, at a corporate level, and eventually at a region, country level, it's happening the same. So we are developing a software that in combination with our hardware is able to balance these demands. No? We know that we are human beings and we have habits, and these sometimes don't reflect how the energy is being produced. No? And we will need to, the more we invest in renewables, we will be more exposed to that. And when we say we want to put our position in a transition mode, it's why we enable all this. No? And thanks to software that is able to manage all these different things, and eventually the need of buffering energy, because that will be really, really important. All this energy is being produced, and sometimes during the night. The way to equalize this is thanks to the tools that we already have today. And that's why we are engaging pilots to do the serious deployed in massive corporates. No? And eventually, as an example for Wallbox last year, we were able, just with the first deployment and release of our software, to reduce by nearly 20% our CO2 impact in the ecosystem.
Yeah, thank you. So now a quick question about like how the economy is looking these days. We have talked about large investments by governments, companies, individuals to get to net zero, but the payback might be very long term. We want to get there by 2050. Some companies are going to get there much faster, or some countries. But do you think that with some economists predicting a short recession in the next couple of years, some of those investments are going to be at risk because nobody wants to invest for something that is going to be a payback in more than 5 or 10 years? So this is a short question for all of you. So if you can start with Eduard.
Well, it's my opinion. No? It's honestly, with the global warming and all this situation, no, I think it's difficult to say somebody is going to push back all this, right? I think it's unstoppable. What the politicians should do is think on the citizens and transition. No, never try to broke on the things, try to find the correct path. Sometimes it's difficult because you need to manage many things on that. But I truly think the path we are taking now, it's great. The REPowerEU that it's been announced is in that direction. And I hope we are all smart to provide also to them with technology. Also, customers can understand that sometimes it will have a cost, because eventually what we have done on the planet has a cost. And I hope this somehow we manage to make it smooth.
Yeah. Gonzalo?
Well, I was a few weeks ago with Al, indeed, in Davos, and having a conversation around this topic. I don't know if he mentioned this during his talk today, but we're talking about the era of the consequences, right? That's where we're living. And the era of consequences, unfortunately, comes with a level of suffering, right? So part of the conclusion of Davos that week was about how this is not an or, but an and agenda, where of course, the war in Ukraine, the invasion in Ukraine, definitely the tsunami of famine that we are confronting now, the consequences, the economical consequences that you are referring to due to COVID, and of course the invasion, all of that is simply adding to something that, as Eduard said, is absolutely inevitable. We have to move forward with that, and also take into consideration that I believe it was 3 years ago when the CIA said climate crisis is mostly an element of security. For many countries around the world, the climate action is an element that is totally related to security and competitiveness. And we're seeing now the consequences of not understanding that on time, and now we have to, again, add this element of instability to the inevitable agenda of tackling climate change, with now a really important element of solidarity that is growing as much as we take more and more time to bring the solutions on board, then it will require more and more solidarity.
Yeah, Eugenia?
I agree. I don't think we are going, or we can afford to change our long-term goals, but we will have to navigate what we are finding in our way. So social unrest, we will have to solve energy independence for Europe, now this food problem that we are facing. And so we'll have to be very good managers to navigate this without altering our long-term goals.
Yeah. Maria?
Well, I think let's say the money devoted to finance the energy transition net zero has been already committed. So there are many, many funds out there which have a life of 10 to 12 years that are committed to invest in this innovation, this technology. So this is not going to stop. The LPs are not going to take out the money from the funds and then invest in another. So that, plus the fact that 15 years ago, wind and solar wasn't profitable by them, like competitive. So we needed support from subsidized to make them competitive in the market. Now is not the situation. Solar and power are cheaper than coal and, for example, nuclear energy or other forms. So I think it's a matter of market pull. It's true that the recession is going to affect somehow to these technologies that are not profitable yet or competitive yet, to displace let's say, the brown ones. But I think that together with what Gonzalo was saying, which is very important about the conflict with Ukraine, is about energy independency. It's not only about being clean. It's about being independent from those which has the resources that we don't.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that altogether will make that. I think this is something that is going to continue and is not going to be affected very hardly by the recession. But recessions are hard, and we will see in any case.
Yeah. Thank you, Maria. And the last question of the panel. A lot of people come to these conferences about innovation to know how the future is going to look like in 4 years, 7 years, or 10 years. Things that now sound very futuristic or utopian, but in 7 years' time, you look back and you say, well, that was going to be inevitable. And that could be about internet, the use of mobile phones, crypto, biology, health. So can you give us an example of something that in 7 years' time, some of those changes of habits or new policies or new technologies are going to be so mainstream that life is going to be so different to what we know today? You have talked about the cars with combustion engines that are not going to be on the road at some point. But can you give us an example of that so the audience can dream about how the future is going to look like? And we're going to start with Eduard, if you want.
I don't know. In general, disruption happens and we don't realize it. No, it's when you take time and you look back. But today it's happening. No, we come from a pandemic. I think it changed a lot of things. Now, fortunately, part of the things we lost, we are gaining back. But like a dream, no? What would be a dream? A dream would be like the things, because I cannot forecast what is going to happen. We are moving towards our dream. Wallbox moves on that direction. And eventually, we said many times here, energy independence that is affordable, that doesn't harm the ecosystem, and I think that the kind of things, how to achieve that, I think a lot of technology will be taking place. I hope there is a massive disruption still to come. I don't know, in how we store energy, for example, green hydrogen, maybe, different kind of cells, maybe. It's kind of things we need to invest on it, and eventually, as we say, try to take this from the user caveats, not the problems. We want that to make that existing for the customer, understand that if needs to be to charge, is like an asset. Okay, now I can decide where I charge. I charge at home, I charge in my workplace, or I charge in public. That could be an example. No, the dream is this kind of these things that are solved, and we don't think them as a problem to be solved. And then we have a decade to think in new things.
Thank you. 30 seconds each of you, because I think that we are...
We mapped 32 sectors of the economy and seeing that almost in 20 of them, the technologies are being deployed and accelerated. I won't stop in those. The one that definitely excites me very much is the work on the IFRS. So how the accountants will work on understanding there's no way that we can live more with negative externalities in how we measure success. So in very short period of time, we will see that not only carbon emissions, but nature and equality will be part of the accounting system of every major and hopefully every company around the world. That will happen. It's already being designed. That you must get ready for that.
Thank you. Eugenia?
If I have to choose one, no single-use plastic. You will go to the supermarket and you can have choices. You don't have to return home filled with plastic that's thrown away and goes back into the ocean.
Thank you. Maria?
I think carbon capture in 5 to 10 years will be the use cases will work. Also green hydrogen as well. And of course other innovation like removing plastics and with all these new innovations to substitute some materials will happen in less than 10 years for sure.
So thank you everyone, thank you everyone for listening. They are going to be around for questions.